welcome to Have Guitar Will Travel, presented by Vintage Guitar Magazine, with your host, me, James Patrick Regan, otherwise known as Jimmy from the Deadlies, and today I'm speaking with surf music historian and guitarist with Jon and the Nightriders, Jon Blair. In our conversation, Jon talks about learning the guitar at an early age and his first guitar, as well as his guitars throughout the years and his current collection. Jon also takes us through his bands and his early influences and what Jon thinks was the first quote-unquote surf song. Jon also talks about his experiences with the beginning of surf music in the Southern California area. Jon tells us about his first book about surf music and his desire to release a surf single of his own, and how that led to the formation of Jon and the Nightriders and a show at the Santa Monica Civic that started the revival of surf music. Jon talks about an album that will be released July 4th from a show in 1995 called Legends of Surf Guitar that he had a large part in producing. Jon finally tells us about his work fostering cats for a local rescue. To find out more about Jon, his books, and his band, you can go to his website, johnblair.us. That's JOHNBLAIR.us. Please subscribe, like, comment, share, and most of all, review this podcast. I'd really appreciate it. And please support Vintage Guitar Magazine and all the wonderful things they do for us guitar players, because they do so many wonderful things for us guitar players. Here's my friend Jon. How are you, Jon?
Hey, I think I'm almost there.
Well, it's nice to meet you. I'm a fan.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. When did you start playing guitar, Jon?
Around 1960, 1959, 1960.
Okay. Right on. What was your first guitar?
It was a Sears Silvertone acoustic with Gene Autry on the front of it, spray painted on the front of it. Either Gene Autry or Roy Rogers. I don't remember what it was, but God, it was an embarrassing guitar. But I took 10 lessons on it, and I just hated going to those lessons because I'm sitting there with this stupid Silvertone guitar with a cowboy, spray painted on the front of it. But yeah, so I lobbied my father very heavily at the time to get me an electric guitar, and he ended up renting me, I don't remember the model number, but it was one of those Silvertones that comes in the case with the speaker.
Sure. Yeah.
And he rented it just so he wanted to see if I really liked electric guitars. And I did, and then I lobbied him very heavily to buy me one, and I saw a 1960 Strat that was for sale, and he bought it for me.
Wow.
And I wish I had saved it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I had, my first real good guitar was a 1960 Strat.
Yeah, wow, right on. And what was it, Sunburst?
Yeah.
Yeah, right on, very good.
Yeah. Yep.
And what'd you have for an amp? Did you still have the case amp from the Silvertone?
No, that was a rental. I bought, my first amp was actually a Bassman.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think that was because, I even remember where I bought it. I think it was because I really liked the piggyback amps at the time, and the Showman was the one I really wanted.
Yeah.
But it was way too expensive, so I ended up getting a Bassman, which actually, a lot of guitar players play out of Bassmans. They're a great amp.
Oh yeah, of course. And which Bassman was it? Was it a '60s Bassman, or was it like a tweed Bassman?
It was a blackface.
Okay, all right.
So yeah, it was probably a 62 or 3.
Okay.
Something like that.
Yeah, very cool. And how early did you start playing in bands?
Pretty soon after that. I think I had a little surf band in 63.
Okay.
So that would have been my first one in 63. And then, I've been in and out of several bands since then.
Sure you have. Was it the music you were listening to surf the whole time?
Yeah, pretty much. It was because, at the time I was learning how to play the guitar. So I had 10 lessons in 1959, I believe. And then I was on my own, and I found it a lot easier to pick up guitar by listening to guitar instrumental records. So I think a lot of people did that at the time.
Yeah.
So Duane Eddy, Link Wray, The Ventures, of course, and in 1962 and 63, we had this, I lived in Southern California, so all of a sudden there was this influx of dozens and dozens of surf records, starting with Surfer's Choice by Dick Dale. So that stuff was, those were my guitar teachers.
Yeah.
I told Dick one time, I said, you'd never know this, but you were one of my 2 or 3 guitar teachers in the early 60s, along with Noki Edwards and, who else? Having a senior moment, the Fireballs, and then of course the little one-offs kind of that appeared on the radio, like Sandy Nelson's records and things like that. They were just things to play along with and learn how to chord. So that was kind of how I got into the whole thing. And because surf music was so strong in Southern California in 62 and 63, that was my forte. Those were the records I played along with, and that's the style that I pretty much learned over the years.
Yeah. And would you say that song by Dick Dale was the first, like, quote unquote surf song?
I consider, a lot of historians do, that Let's Go Trippin' is probably the first one.
Okay. All right.
It's considered to be the first surf instrumental anyway. Was that your question?
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you consider Dwayne Eddy a surf guitar player or just an instrumental guitar player?
No, just an instrumental guitar player, but a very good one, and legendary, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how about people like Al Caiola or anybody like that? Still, no.
No, that was too pop. I didn't even know who he was at the time. I don't think I discovered Al Caiola until much, much later. And by then, he was not someone that I would particularly care to listen to necessarily.
Yeah.
But yeah, they all came out of the same pot, basically.
Yeah. And was radio playing instrumental surf music? Like, was it like a regular thing?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You know, we kids had transistor radios at the time. That was the big thing, and it kind of freed us up in a way. We weren't stuck listening to a radio at home that plugged into the wall. We could actually take these little radios with us wherever we went. And I lived in Southern California. Where are you located?
I'm in Napa.
In Napa. Okay, but you never lived in Southern California.
I've been there many times, but no, I did not.
Okay. Well, there were two main. I asked because there were two main radio stations, KFXM and KMEN in San Bernardino.
Okay.
And I lived kind of in between San Bernardino and Los Angeles, so we also had KFWB and KRLA. And my little transistor radio was tuned into one of those four stations all the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
So would it be like, you know, pop hits of the day and then a surf tune and so forth?
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic. Where would you go out and see surf bands playing at the time?
I did, but I wasn't old enough to drive around. I didn't even have a car at the time, so I was kind of restricted by friends driving me around to local places. Like, there was one place I remember in Ontario called Ontario Music. It's where I bought my basement amp.
Okay.
And they had surf bands playing on weekends out in front of the store on the sidewalk.
Wow.
And I would see several local surf bands at the time play at Ontario Music. There was a club, a teenage club. I went there a couple of times, a teen nightclub in Ontario, and they would have surf bands play. So yeah, I saw a handful of surf bands at the time. I went to the Teenage Fair in LA once. But that would have been 65 or 66, I think. And they had a shitload of surf bands playing at the Teenage Fair at the time. So that was kind of nirvana for those of us that were young and into surf music at the time.
Sure. And how loud was it? Was it loud or was it?
Oh, I remember it being pretty loud, but you know, nothing that a young kid's ears could not stand. So, you know.
Yeah. And how long did it take you to decide to make your own surf band?
I actually don't remember how the band in the mid '60s came together. I really don't remember. We were called the Intruders. That was about all I do recall. But Jon and the Nightriders, when we started that, I definitely remember how that all happened. But that wasn't until 1979.
Yeah.
But in the '60s, I did have the Intruders and a band that I formed later in the '60s, which was not a surf band. We were called Columbia Bicycle, and we actually started climbing the ladder of success in a way for about 5 minutes, I think, and then it was all over. But we weren't very good. But we had a female singer, lead singer. We kind of modeled ourselves after Jefferson Airplane, and we were doing a lot of that sort of stuff, but no surf music. Yeah.
And what part of LA were you growing up in?
Montclair, actually, to the east by about 60 miles or so. So Montclair was where I went to high school and formed my first surf band. Was in Montclair.
Okay, so quite a ways from the beach.
Oh, yeah, quite a ways from the beach. Yeah, there was never a requirement that a surf band had to live at the beach, or even the guys in the band surfing. There was never a requirement for that.
No.
And the Beach Boys proved us correct.
Exactly. And were you a big fan of the Beach Boys?
Yeah, I don't know about a big fan, but I certainly enjoyed their music. But they were all vocals, and so again, my thing at the time was trying to learn how to play the guitar.
Yep.
And it was hard for me to do that by listening to vocals, but I could do that by listening to guitar instrumentals.
Yeah.
So it was heavily on the instrumental side, not so much on the vocal side. But the first couple of albums the Beach Boys did, they 6 or 7 of the tracks were instrumentals anyway.
Yeah. What was LA like in the early 60s?
Man, you're asking me to go way back.
Sorry.
I had a friend in junior high school and high school who did have a car. It was one of those small 2-seater sports cars.
Uh-huh.
And there were 3 of us, actually, 3 pals that all kind of did stuff together. Not so much going to concerts, but we went to movies in LA. I remember going in and seeing James Bond premieres at the what's that big movie theater in LA that I can't remember the name of, but yeah, we would crowd into his little car and drive into LA. I don't remember the scene at the time. It was just certainly a lot more enjoyable than today. I just don't like driving in LA today at all.
Yes, I don't blame you. It's a young man's game.
Yeah.
So how did Jon and the Nightriders come about? And what were you doing in between, sort of Jefferson Starship type band? Into Jon.
That band only existed for about a year or two, and then I got out of it. I went to college, and didn't do anything in college. I think I had a little informal band at the time in college for a little while. I don't even remember what we were called, but my attention was focused on getting through college, and I graduated from college, and I went into the workforce. And I did a little radio at the time. I ended up back at the college that I graduated from as a staff research associate for 12 years. That was a pretty good job. But then I moved into the private sector and started working as a technical writer in the mid 70s or so. And around, I guess it was 75, I published the first edition of my surf music discography.
Sure.
And I didn't realize that there was that strong of an interest in surf music in 1975, and the book sold better than I thought it was going to sell. Uh-huh. And that kind of lit a light bulb off in my head. I wanted to make a record back in the 60s when I was a kid in one of those surf bands. It was just something that I really wanted to do, but I didn't have the talent, I didn't have the knowledge, and I certainly didn't have the money. Uh-huh. But it was a desire. And that desire stayed with me until 1979. And as a result of the book selling as well as it did, I thought, well, there seems to be an audience out there for surf music, so maybe it's time for me to make the record that I wanted to make back in the 60s. But by 1975, 76, I had actually done some recording, but it was bluegrass music. That's a whole story for another interview. But I went into a recording studio, and kind of saw what was going on and learned how all that worked in the mid 70s. So I had a basic knowledge of recording, and I certainly by that time knew what making a record entailed. So we did it on the cheap. I called 3 friends of mine up and said, you want to do a little record, a little surf record? This is 1979. And sure, they said, why not? So we went to a friend's house that had a TAC 4-track tape deck, and we cut these 4 tunes that ended up on this first EP in 1979. And I did what I had wanted to do in the 60s, and that was it. That was the end of it. Uh-huh. Let's just make a record. I went into LA, I had it pressed, had it mastered and pressed in LA, and then I brought home, I don't remember, I think maybe 500 copies or so in a bunch of boxes, and started selling them in record collecting magazines. And that went over pretty well, and that was my intention. But the name Greg Shaw and Bump Records?
I think it sounds familiar.
Greg, you can Google Greg Shaw. He has a long history in the publishing business and the recording business. But he had Bump Records at the time, and he heard the EP that I did.
Okay.
I had actually, to digress, I had written an article for Bump, which was an interview with Dick Dale.
Okay.
And that was 1975, 76, somewhere in there. That was quite an honor for me to actually go to Dick Dale's house and sit there with him for 3 or 4 hours and interview him. So Greg had published that article of mine, and so we knew one another. And he heard this EP that I had recorded, and he called me one day and he says, this is pretty cool stuff. Nobody's really doing anything like this in 1979. If you will go into a studio and record an album's worth of tracks, I'll put it out. Yeah. When a record label calls you and makes an offer like that, to say, no, I don't think so, is pretty dumb. So at the time I said, hell yeah. So I called the guys back up and said, guess what? We can do an album, and this record label is going to put it out. And so we went into a studio and recorded enough tracks for an album. I sent them to Greg, and he eventually put it out as the band's first album, Surf Beat 80. And it came out in late 79. And that was supposed to be it. Wow, we did a single, an EP, and we did an album. I've fulfilled my 17-year-old kid's desires of having a record done. And so that's it. Now we move on. Well, the record had been out for about 3 months, and I get a phone call from the guy that booked the Starwood Club in LA and 1 or 2 other clubs. He may have booked the Roxy and maybe the Whiskey, I don't remember, but at the time he was known as the booker for the Starwood. And he called me and he said, I just heard this album that Bump has put out, and I'm planning on doing a big surf show at the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium with Dick Dale headlining. Would you be interested in opening for this show? I can only pay you guys $100. Santa Monica Civic. Yeah. Now, if someone says no to that, they're really stupid. So yeah, I said, the band was just supposed to do this album and then go home, but now you're offering us a show at the Santa Monica Civic. Hell yeah. Yeah. So that concert, the Surf Punks were in the middle, and we were opening the Surf Punks and then Dick Dale.
Would you consider the Surf Punks a surf band?
Well, in the sense that at the time they were singing music about the beach. It's punk music. It really wasn't your tried and true surf music. But yeah, they were part of it at the time. The whole scene was starting to bloat a little bit, and that concert at the Santa Monica Civic was considered, and I guess still is, the concert that revived surf music. Wow. I think the place was filled out. It was like 3,000 people in the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. Wow. And so, the buzz hit the streets after that happened, and things were starting to click and starting to happen. The media magazines in LA were starting to cover the scene now. Yeah. The scene as it was basically 2 or 3 surf bands and the Surf Punks. Yeah. That's pretty much what it was.
Who were the other surf bands?
Oh, well, there was a band from West Covina called the Surf Raiders.
Okay.
I think they might have even been from Azusa or whatever, but they were getting some press and getting some attention, and they were starting to play the clubs in LA. Uh-huh. There was a band from San Diego called the Evasions that were really, really good. They did one terrific album, and then they dissolved. Uh-huh. Dick Dale had been absent for a number of years on the scene for a number of reasons, but he was coming back and he was starting to do shows again. And Rhino Records had issued a couple of albums by bands that were kind of impromptu bands. They were bands that were put together just for shits and giggles, Yeah. So there was the beginning of a scene that was happening. Mm-hmm. And Greg Shaw, again, who had put out our Surf Beat 80 album, spinning off of that concert at the Santa Monica Civic, the next thing I know is he gives me a call and he says, we want to do a follow-up to Surf Beat 80. And remember, that the Santa Monica Civic show was the first public performance of my band. We had no intention of going out and playing in the public. We had no intention of doing any more recordings. So all of this was just happening one day at a time. And as these offers started coming in, it was hard for me to say no to some of this stuff. So Greg says, we need to do a follow-up album. And we started talking about it. And by the time that he had called me up to do that, we had already, I forgot to mention the guy that booked the Santa Monica Civic show. Backstage after the show, when he was peeling off $5 $20 bills to pay us our fee,
sure,
he said, would you guys be interested in playing at the Starwood? What? Now you want to book us into a nightclub in LA? Okay, fine.
Yeah.
So we played the Starwood, and then we got an offer to play the Roxy, and then an offer to play the Whiskey, and we were starting to appear at a number of places, and I was saying yes to all of these offers because it was fun and it was new and exciting, and we're doing surf music in 1980 of all times. It was very strange.
Yeah.
So then I get a call from Greg, and he wants to do a follow-up record to Surf Beat 80, and so I don't remember how the idea gelled, but I suggested that we do a live recording because the sound that we were getting live at these clubs and at the Santa Monica Civic was very different than what you heard on that Surf Beat 80 album, which in my opinion was not a very well recorded record. A lot of people, call it a legendary record, and it started all kinds of things going and happening, and it influenced tons of bands. But in my mind, it just wasn't a very good record. It was our first, and it was, okay for me as a young kid. But young kid, I was in my 30s by then. But he wanted to do a follow-up, so I suggested that we do a live record because we just didn't sound live like we did on that first record.
Yeah.
So damn Greg. I mean, I will always be. I don't know what the word is. I will always be, what's the word I'm trying to find? Greg was instrumental to coin a pun, in helping us, and it's just an honor to have worked with him and had him be so interested in the band. So we agreed that a live album would probably be cool to do.
Yeah.
So he brings Wally Hyder's mobile truck behind the Whiskey.
Yeah.
We did 2 nights at the Whiskey A Go-Go, and we had those 2 sets recorded live. And we mixed down the 2 sets and picked out the better tracks between the 2 shows and put them on the second album, which is Live at the Whiskey.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, every interview for a magazine I did for the next 2 or 3 years after that, the first question out of the interviewer's mouth was, why did you guys decide to do a live album for your second record? Yeah. Normally a live record is held off for quite a while.
Of course.
So that was the story, and the reason behind it is our sound and our approach to the music on stage was much louder, if you will, and more dynamic and more exciting than what you heard on that first album.
Yeah. If you don't mind, can I ask you how you came across your band, like Dusty and Nikki Sixx? Isn't Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue, correct?
No, he was not. No. And the Motley Crue guy stole the name.
Yes, he did.
If you read the biography of the band, he mentioned somewhere in there that he doesn't say our band name specifically, but he said his girlfriend had heard this surf band and thought this guy's name, Nikki Sixx, was pretty cool. So he ripped us off. That was Jeff Nicholson, Nikki Sixx. Nikki Sixx was his stage name in a Riverside band called Squeeze.
Okay.
And they were not a surf band by any stretch of the imagination, but that was his stage name. Uh-huh. And Jeff, I had known Jeff for several years, so he was a bass player, a very good bass player, and he was the first one I called when I decided to do the first EP.
Yeah.
And Jeff was the one that brought in Dusty, because Dusty was playing in a punk band at the time called The Press. And so Dusty agreed to join us, and when we did the first single, it was me and Jeff and Dusty and a guy named Ed Black.
Okay.
Now, Ed, this is another side story, and I'll probably lose my whole train of thought here, but
right.
Ed was a Los Angeles studio musician. His big claim to fame was he played the steel guitar on Linda Ronstadt's Silver Threads and Golden Needles.
Wow.
So Ed, at the time, was playing in Carla Bonhoeff's band.
Sure.
Haven't heard. Do you know that name at all?
I do. I lived in San Francisco, so.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I don't know whatever happened to her. Maybe you do, but Ed was playing in her band at the time, and I think she was signed to Columbia. I don't remember exactly, but I think it was Columbia. And so Ed contacted me after I put that first illustrated discography of surf music out in '75 or so. Uh-huh. And I don't know how he got a hold of me, but he called me up one day and he just said, this is cool stuff, and I'm really into Duane Eddy. And blah, blah, blah. And we met up and became quick friends. And so when I needed a rhythm guitar player for that first session, I called him. Uh-huh. And I said, would you like to come out to Orange County where, the house was that we were recording and play rhythm guitar on these tracks? He said, sure. So it was Ed Black who recorded, he was Ed Black, I think, on the EP liner notes. But when we did the album, I called Ed again to come out and play rhythm guitar on the album, which he agreed to do, and he did. Uh-huh. But he was getting cold feet because he had been playing with Carla. She was signed to a label. He was under contract with her. So he played on our first album, but under an assumed name. It was Eddie B. Johnny, which was a combination of Duane Eddy and Johnny B. Good.
Sure.
That was Ed's take on that. Ed has passed away now. He's not here anymore to enjoy all this history of the band that he helped ignite in the beginning. Anyway, because Ed was under contract with Carla, he agreed to do the session for the album, but he wasn't going to play live with us.
Okay.
And we started getting these offers to play at the Starwood, and of course even the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. When Ed was notified about that, he said, no, I'm sorry, I really can't do that because I'm under contract with Carla. So that's when Dave Wronski was brought into the picture. Dave was a friend of Jeff's, and he knew Dave, and he called up Dave and said, would you be interested in joining this band and playing at the Santa Monica Civic? We actually had that gig booked at the time Dave was brought into the band. So that's kind of how the other three guys came into the group in the beginning. And again, and I said this to the guys too, look, we're just gonna do the Santa Monica Civic and then go home. Yeah. And we have an offer to play the Starwood. You guys into that? We're just gonna do the Starwood show and then we're gonna go home. And then the Roxy came, and then the Whiskey came, and then multiple appearances came here and there. Yeah. And so it all evolved from that. But that's the long-winded story of how the four guys got together. Yeah.
And was Dave Wronski as an intense of a guitar player then as he is now?
Oh yeah. Yeah, he's much more intense now than he was then. But he had not done any surf music at all when we did the Santa Monica Civic show and subsequent recordings. He just wasn't anywhere close to where he is now. So that boy, he's a guitar player. Oh
yes, he is, for sure.
He's the guy that he works or used to work until he retired. He worked at Fender for God knows how many years in Corona. And so I'm sure the guy was spent all day tuning guitars, and he goes home and probably sits down and plays a guitar the rest of the night. So Dave was really critical to the band's evolution musically, in my opinion. And I've told him and the rest of the guys in the band, and I'll tell you, there will never be a Jon and the Nightriders without Dave. Okay. He added so much color to what we were doing.
Yeah. Is there still a Jon and the Nightriders? Do you guys still? No.
No. I don't know. 7 years ago, we did a big tiki festival, Tikiana, if you will, Hawaiiana, whatever. It happens every year in San Diego, and they hired us to headline that year. They have a focus every year, or a theme. And the theme that year was new wave music, or the new wave, or something like that. So they reached back into the 80s to have a couple of bands that were part of that whole new wave thing that could identify with the Hawaiiana aspect of this convention.
Yeah.
And they had us play. And I told them at the time that was our swan song. You know, just quit while we were ahead. There was too much else going on at the time, and so on and so forth. And there wasn't a big call for us anyway by then. So that was our last show, and we went out with a bang.
Yeah, you did. Apart from the Jon the Nightriders, do you still keep track of all the new surf bands and stuff that are coming around?
To a degree. I keep my hand in it kind of from a distance, but there is a website called Surf Guitar 101. Mm-hmm. Have you been there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, that's really the central website for everyone and anyone that's into this music to go to read up on current bands and what's going on.
Yeah.
And I drop in on that website a couple times a day just to see what's happening.
Very good. You're releasing a record on July 4th, or are there going to be a record released on July 4th? Is that correct?
Yeah, but that's not a Jon and the Nightriders record, really. You're talking about Legends of Surf Guitar.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's coming out on the 4th of July. It's a two album set, I guess, a gatefold, and a CD at the same time, and streaming. So it's going to be all over the place in early July. This is a historical document, actually. The record was recorded in 1995.
Okay.
At the Lighthouse, which is a jazz club in Hermosa Beach. Uh-huh. It's kind of hard to describe how this thing came together, but there are only two surf bands that played that day that did formal sets. And those were the Shantays, who had regrouped just before that, and they were pretty much at the top of their game in '95, and a band called Paul Johnson and the Packards. And Paul Johnson was the one that put this whole thing on together with a gentleman named Les Perry, Perry. Les was a DJ at KMAX radio in, I think, Pasadena maybe, and he did a surf show every day. Every week. And Paul, of course, was in the Bel Airs. He wrote Mr. Moto. Yeah. And so Paul knew all these old first wave surf musicians. And it was very difficult for him and Les to have a lot of these bands form as full bands because, some of the guys had gone on to other things or had passed away or had moved out of the area. So it was very, very difficult to put together full bands. So they had at least one member of a number of bands, first wave 60s bands and second wave 80s bands, which would include me, appear with a backline of musicians and amps. So, for example, one of the great aspects of this record and of that particular gig was that Bob Demon, who was the rhythm guitar player for the Astronauts out of Colorado, came up from San Diego to partake in this event. Of course, they couldn't have put the whole band, the Astronauts, together again. That would have been something to have heard in 1995. But Bob agreed. So Bob came up and played rhythm guitar for 3 Astronauts tunes, which I was honored to have been asked to play the lead on. So I played lead on 3 Astronauts tunes. Bob played rhythm guitar.
Right on.
And then we had Davey Allen there, but there weren't the Arrows. It was Davey Allen representing the Arrows.
Sure.
And he did 2 or 3 Arrows tunes with a backline of musicians. And this went on the whole day. So it was Davey Allen and Paul Johnson. It was the Shantays. It was Jim Masoner, who was the lead guitar player in the Lively Ones. He got up and did 3 or 4 tunes. And then Jim Pash showed up from the Surfaris. He was actually the sax player in the Surfaris. Not sure why Paul couldn't get at least a couple of the other guys that were in the original band to show up because they were still alive at the time. But Jim was the only one from the Surfaris that showed up, and he ended up playing Wipeout, closing the evening out.
Yeah.
So the whole day was recorded by Mark Lynette, who's a name that you're probably familiar with. He has produced all of Brian Wilson's solo projects in the last 10 years or so. Yeah. He's won 3 or 4 Grammy awards. He's really good. But Mark recorded the whole thing with actually with Elliot Easton, which is kind of interesting. Yeah. He and Elliot have been good friends for years and years. And for some reason that I don't know the answer to, he and Elliot drove out to or down to Hermosa Beach together. And Elliot helped Mark load in the equipment. Now, the interesting thing about that is that nobody, Paul Johnson, who the guy that created that date and did all of the connections with the surf musicians, Paul didn't know that Mark was there recording this.
Oh, wow.
Nobody. I didn't know. I didn't know Mark at the time.
Wow.
I knew Elliot. I didn't know him personally, but I knew who he was, and he sat at the bar across from the stage the whole day. And I just thought that was kind of interesting that the lead guitar player from the Cars was sitting there listening to this whole schlemiel of surf music all day long.
Yeah.
So Mark had recorded it, and now flash forward a few years, Mark and I have worked on a couple of projects in the last 5 years, recording projects. And so now I know Mark, and Mark called me one day about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, said, I just came across these tapes in a drawer that I'd stuck away of this 1995 show. Uh-huh. And I think it would be a good release to put this out. So I asked Mark to send me rough mixes of the whole thing. And man, it was my mind was blown that not only was that event recorded, but that Mark had recorded it and kept the tapes. And now here we are 2 years later, and the record's about to come out. Right so it's very well recorded. It's got a lot of great music on it, and it's above and beyond everything else in my mind. It's a historical document of a time when surf music was still being spread. There were new bands that were still forming. This was 1 year after Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
And that soundtrack, the Pulp Fiction soundtrack, had a lot of surf instrumentals in it.
Sure.
And in 1995, this was April 1st, 1995. By then, I suspect that soundtrack was still on the top 100 in Billboard. It was still selling a good year after Pulp Fiction came out.
Yep.
So there was a lot of street buzz just because of that. And here was a kind of a revival performance, if you will, at the Lighthouse. And I think that's one thing that attracted a lot of people to this. But since then, there have been a lot of these so-called air quote surf band revival shows, some of which involved full bands, some of which involved almost full bands, and some of which involved 1 or 2 members of old first wave surf bands. But there have been a lot of these revivals since 95, but 95 was one of the very first times this was attempted. And now we have an audio record of it.
Right on. Very good. That's fantastic. Let me ask you, do you still have a guitar collection at all?
I have about 17, 18, yeah.
And what does it look like? What kind of guitars do you have?
They're all Fenders. They're all Fenders except for a Rickenbacker 12-string. It's the Harrison model, which has a neck on it I can actually put my hand on and chord. I had one of the other Rick models, the McGuinn type of guitar, and I just couldn't play. I had to sell that eventually. I couldn't play it. The neck was too damn small. So I have that one Rick. I have a whole bunch of Fenders, and I've got a couple of Gibson acoustics, and that's pretty much it. I think I have one oddball guitar that I bought for some stupid reason. I don't remember the name of it now, but yeah, they're mostly all Fenders.
And are the Fenders vintage Fenders, or are they?
Two of them are vintage. The rest of them are AVRIs. The 2 vintage ones, I have a 63 Strat that's all original except for one screw in the pick guard had to be replaced. I bought that when I turned 63 because I wanted a birthday present for myself, and that was the big Klieg light that went off in my head. So I spent a little fortune buying that 63 Strat at the time, but it's one of my favorite guitars. And then I have a Frankenstein that's kind of an interesting thing. I bought this guitar at a guitar show in Hollywood in 1980. I think it was 1980, somewhere in there. It's a 57 Strat body with a 61 neck.
Wow.
And the guy was selling it for $600 around 1980 or so. So, I couldn't pass that one up.
Yeah. And the 63, where did you buy that?
That was bought from a rare guitar dealer from Arizona.
Okay.
I found him online. I found the guitar online, and it just so happened he was making a trip out to Southern California to buy or sell. And I said, could you bring the 63 with you? Which he did. Do you know the name Steve Soest?
Sounds very familiar. I don't know it off the top of my head, but it sounds very familiar.
Steve is a luthier, a very famous and well-known luthier from Orange, California. He's pretty much retired from the business now, but Steve is a longtime friend of mine, as are many, many, A-list musicians and B-list musicians. But I had the guy that came out from Arizona meet me at Steve's because I wanted Steve to look at the 63 guitar and make sure that it was how it was advertised. Yeah. And it turned out that it was all original. All the pots and everything were they were all original. There was one screw hole, I think, that was a little stripped, and Steve put a new screw in it for me. Yeah. But yeah.
Very good. And the rest of your Fenders, are they Strat models or are they different models?
No, they're all Strats except for I think I've got a couple of Jaguars and one Jazzmaster. It's a 59 Jazzmaster. So I guess, that could be considered a vintage guitar too. I forget about that. I hardly ever play it.
Okay. And why do you find yourself not playing it?
I don't know. There's something about this Jazzmaster that's weird, and I really haven't gotten much into it. I bought it because I tell you why I bought it. The 57 Strat that I had, not the 63. I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole now, but the 57 Strat I had refinished in Burgundy Mist. Okay. At some point when Jon the Nightriders was playing out quite a lot. I really liked the burgundy color, and I had it refinished in Burgundy Mist, which actually I regret doing, but nevertheless it was done. Then a number of years later, I bought a Burgundy Mist Jaguar with a matching headstock. I don't remember what year it was. I'm pretty sure it's an AVRI. But I liked the color, and I just wanted. I had what the hell? I forget my color names now. It was a blue, a Jaguar. What color am I trying to think of? Not Sonic, but it was a dark blue Jaguar. Actually, that's a vintage too. I forgot about that. Sorry. I got more than just a couple of vintage guitars. That's a 65 or a 66 Jag. Okay. I guess I wanted another Jaguar, but basically it was because I came across this one and it was Burgundy Mist, and I bought it to match the Strat that I had finished. Okay. So now we flash forward a few years later, and a guy I know who played in another surf band at the time was selling his Burgundy Mist painted 59 Jazzmaster. So I had to have that too. So I'd have a Strat, a Jag, and a Jazzmaster, all Burgundy Mists. I just thought that was kind of cool to have. So I bought the Jazzmaster only because of the color, not because I really wanted a Jazzmaster. Okay. If I was really going to go out anymore or record with a Jazzmaster, I'd probably buy a new one. Okay. Or find a good AVRI from the 80s or 90s.
And no Telecasters?
No Telecasters. Nope.
It's not a surf guitar?
No, not really. I don't have a dual sonic either, or any of those other weird Fender models. But I do have 6 or 7 Strats.
Okay. And what about amps? Do you have any vintage amps?
I've got a 61 blonde Showman that it's been refinished or recovered, but it's my number one amp. It's a great sounding Showman amp. I've got a mid-60s Bassman. I had a 50th anniversary twin that was blonde, but I ended up selling it because I just never really used it. Sure. And those twins are really loud, really heavy anyway. And if I'm going to schlep around a heavy amp, it's going to be a dual Showman. It's not going to be a twin reverb. So I have a deluxe reverb that I had a matching blonde. It's a blonde deluxe reverb. Wow. Again, I think it was a 50th anniversary or some kind of an anniversary model. And I had a separate speaker cabinet made for it that the deluxe reverb sits on top of. Okay. And that was my go-to amp for several years when I played live. The deluxe reverb has a really great sound to it. And what else do I have? I've got two. Super reverbs. One's a 65 and one's a 66, which I'm trying to sell right now.
Oh, really? Where are you trying to sell it?
Where?
Yeah.
Locally, really, because I could put them on reverb, which I have not done. I just don't want to ship these things.
Sure,
I don't want to have to go through the hassle of shipping an amp like that.
Yeah.
So just strictly local ads for the thing. I don't expect it to sell anytime soon. It's been advertised now for a year or two.
Yeah.
But hey, I'm not going anywhere. The amp's not going anywhere.
Exactly.
It just keeps appreciating in value, the longer people wait for it. They're both really clean, too. Both of them are absolutely clean super reverbs.
Yeah. And how about reverb tanks, separate reverb tanks?
I have 3 of them. I have 3 old Fender tanks, 1 blonde and 2 browns. They're all great. I just acquired them during the Jon the Nightriders years for one reason or another. Yeah. So, I got 3 of those.
Yeah. Well, this has been great, Jon. I really appreciate. Like I said, I'm a fan. I'm a big fan. And
well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, vintage guitar. I've written for vintage guitar before.
Yes, you have.
Dan Fort's a good friend of mine.
Oh, good. Yeah, Tiesco del Rey.
And Pete Brown is actually doing a review in the August issue for the Legends of Surf Guitar album.
Oh, very good.
That we've been talking about. Yeah. So, I read VG every month. It's a great magazine.
Sure it is. Anything that you do outside of music, and like what do you do to kill time or to for fun?
Well, since you asked, my other big involvement is with fostering cats for a local cat rescue group.
Right on.
The last few years, I've just gotten into that. After I retired from my day job, which was 30 plus years as a technical writer. I decided I wanted to do something to give back to my community, and I wasn't sure what that was. But I finally landed on, I had a cat or 2 of my own at the time, and I thought, fostering cats for a rescue and helping out a local rescue with what, they do is something I think I would enjoy doing, and I've been doing it now for 10, 12 years.
Wow.
So there's that.
I haven't seen one cat or heard one cat this whole interview.
They're hiding somewhere. They're not very vocal anyway.
Well, that's good.
They're not all that vocal, but yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you for your time, Jon. And if people want to get a hold of you, where would they go?
JohnBlair.us is my website.
Okay. And
I have a Facebook page, so they can easily reach out to me there.
Yep.
Or on the website. It's I'm easy to find.
Okay, good. And I look forward to the album coming out, July 1st. July 4th.
Yeah, July 4th. Yep, just a little while away.
Right on.
It should be cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
All right. Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Have Guitar Will Travel. You can catch up on all the things I'm doing at thedeadlies.com. And I'm on all the social media platforms as well. And please support Vintage Guitar and all the wonderful things they do, because they do many, many wonderful things for us guitar players. Thanks. Please subscribe. Please tell a friend. And I'll see you guys next week. Bye, guys.